And then I turn around and he's right there. And he heard me say that. I just got caught with my foot in my mouth, being ingrateful that this guy didn't catch a part of the match that I wanted it to have. And I said, that fucking guy. And he's just right there. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm a fucking asshole. Like,
what's the most efficient path to victory against this particular opponent?
He's dropping off for the choke here. We could see the finish. It's looking tight. Tight at Alpra.
Hello, welcome to the Everyday Jiu-Jitsu Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Kwan. The Everyday Jiu-Jitsu Podcast is everything you need to know about Jiu-Jitsu. Today, we are going to discuss the topic, the fastest ways to stifle your growth in BJJ. I also have a couple of other things I want to touch on, but before we get to all that good stuff, this is a reminder to like, share, subscribe. If you want to support the show, check out the links in the bottom. Leave a comment, leave a review, share the show wherever you can. I really appreciate all of your support. Okay, guys, so if you're going to stay in this game long enough, you're going to come across plateaus, setbacks, and other things that will stifle your growth. But just by changing the way you look at things, your mindset, how you approach problems, and how you're going to approach your journey as a whole in the long term, you can really avoid some of these biggest growth stiflers in BJJ. So I wanted to touch on a couple of those things today. The first one is the idea of hesitation. Of course, if you're never going to get started in jiu-jitsu, like so many people that we all know, you're never going to get good. And the longer that you wait to get started in jiu-jitsu, the slower you're going to ever progress if you ever do begin. That's why I always tell people that I believe the white belt is actually the hardest belt to get, because it involves you actually changing your routine, getting off your butt, getting off the couch, and going to a padded room where there's people who know more stuff than you, and they're all trying to strangle you and kill you. And you're basically thrown into the, into the shark tank, and it's like a sink or swim situation. So I always say the white belt is the hardest belt to get. And remember that if you never get started, obviously you don't get to experience the awesome sport of jiu-jitsu, but it's just, if it just takes longer and longer, the more that you put off joining a sport like jiu-jitsu to actually reach any improvement. And so that first initial hesitation where people don't want to join, that is such a growth killer in the sport, because breaking your routine is difficult and a lot of people just want to stick to what they're comfortable with. And I totally understand that. Anyone who's ever picked up a new skill where it seems daunting at the beginning, there's a lot of people that you're surrounded with that know more than you. It is not a fun thing, and that's kind of part of the growth. Plus life gets in the way, kids, work, etc. Now you're being asked to take on this task of learning this brand new skill that takes a lot of dedication and a lot of time. So you'll always hear people say things like, "Oh, I'll get in shape first and then I'll try jiu-jitsu." Like, I've heard this so many times, and it does seem logical, but in reality, there's really no merit to this, because you could be totally a 5-star athlete in one particular discipline, and then you go into jiu-jitsu and maybe you have like incredible cardio, you're a marathon runner, but you get thrown into jiu-jitsu and within 3 minutes you're absolutely exhausted. And that's because nothing can really prepare you for jiu-jitsu, the grind that is jiu-jitsu. Even high-level wrestlers that go into jiu-jitsu, even though I think the sport is a little bit more forgiving in terms of crossing over, because it is a grappling sport, it's very, very common that wrestlers get absolutely exhausted when they do jiu-jitsu. They have issues with the long burn that is a jiu-jitsu match or a jiu-jitsu round. They're used to doing everything high intensity, super fast. They hate being on their back. It's a lot more explosive and a lot more intense, and jiu-jitsu guys tend to flow more and relax more, and it tends to be more of a slow burn than a wrestling match. So even wrestlers, I find, have issues preparing themselves for jiu-jitsu training. And so nothing can really prepare you for a sport like jiu-jitsu. You just kind of need to do it and sort of find where you can be comfortable in the sport, and also your body must adapt. There's going to be probably a couple of years for the beginner white belt where their body is going to be getting shocked in different ways it's never been shocked before, using core and muscle groups that you've never used before. And it just takes time to condition your body and your mind for the sport like jiu-jitsu. So next time anyone ever tells you, oh, I just need to get in better shape before I join jiu-jitsu and then I'm going to be right there, it's like, nothing can prepare you for this. You just have to jump in, and it's going to suck at first, and that's just how it is. Another mention of hesitation is the idea of hesitation in the middle of a match. If you're waiting for that perfect move to happen, or you're waiting for that perfect time to execute a technique, if you're waiting for that, it's just not going to happen, especially at the higher levels, or very rarely it will happen. And so hesitation can lead to a lackluster performance because, usually you're hesitating and waiting for an opportunity that passes you by. And so you do have to develop sort of an instinctual ability to just react. And the best fighters can react and pull the trigger when an opportunity is about to present itself, or they can create an opportunity. They can predict an opportunity is going to be there, and they go for it right then and there. I remember I worked, speaking on hesitation, just a guy, I worked with a lot of colorful characters in the hotel industry as a chef. And this one guy, we had like our RSB funds, and it was basically, RSB funds sometimes is kind of marketed to you as free money. And I guess it is free money, but it's kind of all fake money, right? If you all know what money actually is, like, it's not really real. It's just zeros that are added, and we're just living in a debt-based system. And he basically had hesitated on this RRSP thing, and he had worked for the company for like 15 years. And he's like, well, I haven't started already, and I'm not going to start now. And I'm thinking like, well, why wouldn't you just like start and, put this free money away into RRSPs? And then, when you retire, if we ever retire in like 2 or 3 decades, there will be like a nest egg for you in theory, right? Assuming the whole house of cards doesn't come collapsing down. This house of cards, that is our debt-based economy. And he's just like, nope, haven't started yet, and I don't plan on ever starting. And it's like, okay. And then I, was new at this hotel, and I had worked there for almost 10 years by the time I left to start a career in jiu-jitsu. And, I made this so-called free money by just signing up for RSPs and putting a little bit away every paycheck. And so this guy definitely missed out on this so-called, free RRSP money. His investments suffered because he hesitated. And you see people do stuff like that all the time. I'm not giving you financial information or telling you to invest or to get RRSPs, but I am saying that, like, there's things that you can do with your money. There's things you can do with your finances that can pay off in the future with this system that we currently have. And his attitude was just like, well, I haven't started yet, so why would I start now? It's like, that's a dumb reason to not do something. It doesn't matter if it's jiu-jitsu, finances, or anything else. So that was just something that I always remembered. And I always thought, like, man, this guy's like hesitating just for the sake of hesitating, knowing that it kind of has like a pathological effect on his finances. So why wouldn't he just jump off and invest like everyone else? Okay, the next thing, not establishing a strong routine. So this will absolutely stifle your growth in BJJ. Not establishing a strong routine. There's people who, they join jiu-jitsu and they go super hard, too fast, all at once, and then they burn out and they don't want to ever come back after a couple of months. And then there's people who will show up consistently for a couple months, then they'll drop off for a couple months, and then they'll show up for a couple months, and then they drop off for a year. And like, as a gym owner, I've seen all these different types of people. And then there's people who just show up a couple times a week consistently for 10, 15, or, however many years. And these are the people who actually see a consistent progression. Now, obviously, we all know the more time you put in jiu-jitsu, the more you study, the better your training partners and your coaches, the more consistent you are as a practitioner, the better you're going to get. And that's what I always tell people when they say, how often should I train? I say, as often as you can, that your body and your lifestyle allow for it. Train as often as you can, and you will get way better, way faster. And establishing a strong training routine, regardless of your lifestyle, is an incredibly important part of how you're going to progress in jiu-jitsu. And it's that consistency, over time that really, really adds up. And that doesn't mean go 100% every day, train as hard as you can every day. I used to do that in my 20s, and I just can't do that anymore. Now, I'm also, on a side note, I'm playing on 2 hockey teams this year. So I play hockey 2 to 3 times a week, plus training practically every day. And I'm 36. I can't train hard every day anymore. I just don't have the energy. Plus I'm wrestling on the weekends. which is a whole other story because I really want to improve my wrestling for ADCC style competitions. And for my athletes who do MMA, I want to be a better wrestler. So I'm doing that. And it's just, I don't have the physical bandwidth to allow for all of this training. So I'm trying to establish a routine that satisfies all of these needs, the needs of my hockey teams, the needs of my students, my own personal training, and it's not easy. So you have to really think about your weekly plan, especially when you are a professional athlete or a gym owner or a professional competitor. How are you going to establish your routine so that you can get the recovery you need? You can satisfy all of the pillars of health, which is a really important thing. The proper diet, sleep, and exercise altogether. All of those good habits should be prioritized instead of results, like winning a tournament, like getting better than your buddy in class, or better, more important than getting the next belt. These are all results that come. They're all byproducts of good habits that are performed on a daily basis over long periods of time. So not establishing a strong routine with good habits absolutely will kill your growth. And what will make your growth flourish in jiu-jitsu is setting up a strong routine that works for you, works for your lifestyle, and obviously satisfies the 3 pillars of health. All right, next one is mental training. Neglecting mental training. If you think that jiu-jitsu is only showing up to class and doing the lesson that your instructor gives you and rolling and going through the motions, then you go home, you will get better, most likely, unless you're training in an absolute dog shit gym. But if you study outside of that and see what all these, all the best athletes, all the best coaches, the best teams, how they're training and their concepts and the techniques that they do, if you start studying them, you're going to see huge explosions in growth, especially, if your instructor is not up to date on the current meta, if your instructor is old school, or I don't even want to say that anymore because now everyone's got their own specific style, and your instructor might not even be old school. They might just have a specific style that is very fundamental based, or very gi based, or very IBJJF based, or very wrestling based. Everybody has their own style as an instructor, and to think that your instructor can teach you everything is just simply not the case. At least I would say in 99% of the situations, unless you're training with the Mendes brothers or John Danaher or Gordon Ryan or whatever, or at the B team, it's like you're probably not going to be able to see what is out there just through your team and your coach. So definitely making sure that you're going and doing that extra bit of study outside of the gym is very, very important. I've said so many times on the show, there's infinite resources. Guys, if you want to watch DVDs, check out Bilibili. Just get the Bilibili app. You can watch tons of instructionals. Sorry to my my BJJ peers who are making instructionals, but I don't mean to encourage people pirating your content, but hey, this is a great way to watch instructionals. I think we've all pirated content at one point or another, and Bilibili is a great way to do it. So like if you just go and watch 10 minutes of video a night, or, you identify a huge hole in your game and you're like, I need to get better at that. Where can I do some mental training on that? You can get some great golden nuggets of information just by watching some of these instructionals that are getting put out now. And nowadays there's more instructionals than you could ever absorb. So, there's really no excuse for there's no lack of information out there. It's all up to the practitioner to actually create the time and the routine to study and to prioritize mental training, outside of class time. So that's very, very important. Another thing that will stifle your growth is feeding your bad ego, starving your good ego. And I've had people say, because I've recently talked about ego on the podcast, and it's a regular thing that I talk about. A lot of people say, no, ego is all bad. Good ego just means self-confidence or whatever. And I guess there's an argument to that. But I just look at ego as like, it's kind of that voice in your head that tells you that you can do something or that you deserve something. It could be bad. It could be good. And I think that starving good ego and sort of telling that good ego to shut up and listening to the bad ego that's telling you that you deserve more and, you're never going to get enough. You're never good enough. All these types of things. That's going to definitely stifle your growth in jiu-jitsu. It's important to understand that voice inside will always exist, and it's not a bad thing. It's something that you should just observe, and you should observe what is good about it and what is bad about it, and try and leverage it to your advantage rather than stifling it altogether or label it as something that is bad. I don't think that it is bad, especially if you're a competitive athlete, a competitive person like myself, or, if you want to accomplish things, it's best to understand that that ego is a crucial part of your growth if you can use it. But if you don't, if you're feeding the bad ego, a lot of people might look at you in a way where they're like, that guy's a dick, or that guy thinks a lot of himself, etc. So being unable to accept criticism is a big example of, feeding bad ego. Somebody comes up to you and they say, hey, I saw something you did. Like, I think that this is a really good answer for that. Or this is something that I think would be really great for your game. And you just like blow it off or whatever. Or someone has a suggestion for you as a teammate. Maybe they're coaching you a little bit as to how you're conducting yourself in the gym, something like this, and you blow it off and you don't accept criticism. That is, you're just starving the good ego and feeding the bad ego. So it's better to just like be able to take criticism, right? And I take it all the time as a gym owner. I always ask for criticism and I always publicly accept it because it shows people, hey, I'm human. I don't know everything. And I have an open door policy. And, it would be like going to a gym, and this actually happened to me once. I remember I was training with some girls at my buddy's gym, and we were demonstrating. I don't know. My buddy had demonstrated a technique, and I was going around. I was one of the senior ranks there, and I was just helping. Like I wasn't just like drilling with my partner. I was walking around the room and sort of helping people with the technique. And then I remember one of the ladies. It was a takedown. And one of the ladies was like, I was showing her how to take a break fall. And every time she took a break fall, she would hold on to her partner's jacket. And what that means is like in judo, you're kind of told that if you get thrown, you should let go of your partner's jacket because there's a chance that you could pull your partner on top of you and, increase the impact. And I said, yeah, you should take a clean break fall, let go of their jacket so you don't pull them on top and take the fall. And then she was like, well, this is how I like to do it. And I'm like, all right, I guess, like, what do I know? I was like, I'm pretty sure I was a black belt or a brown belt at the time. And that we're talking about like a 3-stripe white belt. And it's like that kind of attitude will just make it so that higher ranks don't want to help you. Right. And when you blow someone off like that, you're not really validating the knowledge or the information that they might have, or even if they're incorrect, you're not able to just take that information and observe it for yourself and make a decision about it. You already have your mind made up. Oh no, this is how I like to do it. And it's like, well, people have been doing it this way for a long time. I've heard many judo instructors tell me that, when you take a fall, like don't pull your partner on top of you, learn how to let go and learn how to go with the throw. And so basically when she told me that, I thought, all right. And I just walked away. I was like, if this is how you like to do it, well, then you can figure it out yourself. I hope you don't take a hard break fall one day and hurt yourself, but that'll be a learning lesson if you do. So ego can get you in a lot of trouble, but it can also push you. And I'm a big advocate for that. Do not kill your ego altogether, but starve the bad ego, feed the good ego. All right. Another thing that will definitely stifle your growth, one of the biggest ones, is training I'll just say it like this, the wrong place. What does the wrong place mean? I think more specifically, I mean the wrong place for you, because what is a wrong place for somebody might be a good place for somebody else. Everyone's looking for something different. As a gym owner, I have my own mission, my own vision for my gym, and it might be suitable for a certain type of practitioner, but for another practitioner, it might not satisfy their needs. Some people want a less competitive gym with more recreational roles, and they're happy to have that. And there's absolutely a place for those types of environments. That is not what I like to have. I like to have something for everybody, but also if you're a high level competitor, I want to offer that kind of instruction and that kind of training as well. And so if you stay in a place where there's red flags going off and you are unsatisfied about it, or something about your instructor that you don't like, you should definitely pay attention to those red flags, because you're getting those feelings for a particular reason. I actually have a lot of people come talk to me, whether it's through the podcast or just as a gym owner, and they want advice about an issue they're having with their instructor, or do you think that this is culty behavior and things like that? And it's like, man, if you're getting those signals going off in your head, it's probably for a reason. And I think that those things are important to observe and to consider, even if it's, even if you plan on staying. Things like, not surrounding yourself with, quote, the right people, whatever that is for you. Maybe it's a room full of absolute killers and you just want to go in there and get a sweat and make some friends and do a little bit of jiu-jitsu. You don't want to get your ass kicked by the A team every single time. Maybe that's not the right gym for you. Maybe you are somebody who really wants to be a competitive athlete. This is actually what happened to me. You want to be a competitive athlete. You want to be surrounded by competitors and people who have been in competitions and have won competitions, and you stay at a place for a period of time out of convenience, or maybe they're paying you, or for whatever other reason. And it's just not the right environment for you, for your journey, for how you predict your journey to go 5-10 years down the road. And so I think it's important to recognize that and to put a stop to it so you can make, don't hesitate. Again, echoing what we talked about at the beginning of the show, kind of making that adjustment as early as possible so that you can get on the right track, whatever that is for you. A lot of people that don't want to train with like high level athletes or competitors, they choose the comfort of training with recreational people over the struggle of training with really high level people. And again, I get that. Not everyone prioritizes like their growth and, difficult training, and that's fine. But they're definitely going to grow less than somebody who immerses themselves in a very, very difficult high level training environment. And that's just, I don't think that there's any argument against that. I think that that's pretty self-evident if you look at most cases. Or let's say you're at a place where the coach doesn't care about you. They're not passionate. Maybe they have another job and they don't really care too much about jiu-jitsu anymore. They're just kind of doing it because they're going through the motions at this point, or maybe they lost their passion for the sport. This is all very possible. A coach that doesn't handle suggestions or criticism. We talked about that earlier in the show. Like that, those are people who are probably going to stifle your growth if you keep training around them, because you will echo what your coach teaches you. This is something that's happened to me. We've seen this happen with many, many athletes. They become, or they pick up traits and techniques and even, nomenclature of their coaches. And that's just how it is. It's just how people are with their mentors. A lot of the time people do mimic their mentors. And I think that when you're talking about like the culture of a gym, one of the biggest cliches in jiu-jitsu is that BJJ culture is toxic, or that it's shitty. A lot of people say this because they've had bad experiences. Maybe they've been abused by coaches, which is super sad. That does go on a lot. Or they've been subject to some really culty behavior, which is very, very common as well. And I'm not going to name any names or any gym affiliations. I think we all know the ones that I'm probably likely referring to. I think it's a huge cliche and an inaccurate cliche of our sport that BJJ culture is toxic. I think there's incredible culture in jiu-jitsu, and it really comes down to who you surround yourself with and the type of vision that you want to have as a gym owner, even as a practitioner. You surround yourself with the people that you like, people who are, open-minded and are down to earth, and whatever you're looking for. There is toxic culture in, our culture in general, I would say. And I don't want to go pick on the Brazilians, but a lot of the Brazilian culture too has a lot of this toxicity in it. Like, I'm just going to go and say it. There's a lot of Brazilians who are like pedophiles, right? in jiu-jitsu. And we've seen it over and over again. Gym owner is abusing an underage minor. Like, we've seen dozens of stories like this in the last couple of years. But also in the Brazilian culture, I believe legal age of consent is like 14 or something. So there's, that's their culture. To us, it's too young for us, but to them it's like just their culture. So who knows, maybe that's why there's a ton of Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt instructors who try to have sex with these underage girls. Like, who knows? I think that that's not necessarily a jiu-jitsu thing. I think that that's a power. Somebody in a position of power is more likely to do something like that. And it's not necessarily exclusive to jiu-jitsu. It happens in all walks of life. But for me, when I think of the culture of jiu-jitsu, I think about, open-minded people from all walks of life who are just trying to learn something very, very special, a very high level, high quality product that can really enhance their life in a lot of different ways. And they can make great friends and really learn a lot about themselves and discover, a lot of what the human body and the human mind can tolerate in terms of stress and physical pressure and all these different things that just test you in so many different ways. When I think about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu culture, I think about friendships that last a lifetime, people who come into your gym that are very, very special, the connections you make and the way that you can learn from different people. And it's incredible to me. So whenever somebody says, maybe they're done with the sport and they're just exhausted with jiu-jitsu culture and they had a really bad experience, it's really sad to me. And I don't really agree with that cliche that jiu-jitsu culture is toxic. I think there's a lot of toxic culture in our society as a whole, and it does seep into jiu-jitsu. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people in positions of power who push that cliche onto people, and it's very unfortunate. Okay, this one also very important, not training intelligently over the years. So obviously we're referring to like injuries, maybe going too hard. Again, from what I've heard from people, I've never been to Brazil, but a lot of what I've heard in Brazil is the training's very, very hard. They train hard pretty much every day. And that's why Brazilians are so good at jiu-jitsu. And you see them, especially in the gi, like, I guess it would be sort of what John Danaher refers to as the Brazilian flair, like the type of movement that they have a lot of the time, spazzy movements that are, incredibly effective in competition. You can't say that that this style isn't effective. And I've sort of tried to adopt this even more in competition, tried to be more agile and more spazzy, more explosive, because it does help when you're passing someone's guard or you're scrambling out of different scrimmage wrestling situations. It helps to be a spaz when you're high level. It just does. And, a lot of the guys that come from Brazil are used to this. They're conditioned to it. Whereas the training up here is a little bit more soft. And I think we focus a little bit more on like technique and studying and mechanics and things like that. Whereas I think they're lacking in certain things like that in Brazil, but they make up for it with their movements and their heart and their grit and their physical abilities and their conditioning through these difficult, training sessions. And so I think that, when you're 20, you feel immortal. And this happened to me when I was 20. Is like injuries would heal in a couple of days and you'd be able to return to the mats. You'd be able to go as hard as you want every night. I was burning the candle at both ends, getting like 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night maximum while I was working as a chef. And man, that doesn't last forever. Like your youth will not last forever. Once I got to like 28, 29, my body started having these autoimmune reactions, probably due to a lot of different factors. The primary one being diet, but also, I wasn't satisfying those pillars of health, not just the diet of the things I was eating, but like I really was neglecting sleep. And that was not smart. And I think so many people in our culture do neglect sleep because it's hard to get everything accomplished in a day. Especially when you have a full-time job and you want to accomplish other things, it's very, very difficult to get the sleep that you need. And so nowadays, whenever I can sleep in, I take it and I encourage people to get more sleep because it is something that I feel super passionately about because I neglected it for so long. And once I started getting more sleep, I really could appreciate the difference that it was making in my life. And now, as a middle-aged, almost middle-aged, I'm in my mid-30s or later 30s almost. I'll be 37 in February. Like if I don't get sleep now, my body doesn't recover. And I've noticed that. And so things like, relying on your youth and going hard every single day, it's just not sustainable. I think in your 20s, you'll be able to get away with things like that. And hopefully you started jiu-jitsu early enough that you can become really high level when you're in your early 20s. For me, that wasn't the case. I have students like that, but for me, I started when I was 19, 20. And so by the time I was like black belt level, I was already in, 30. And so I didn't really get a chance to be early in my 20s and be a high level competitor, at the highest levels. And that was like a regret of mine because I didn't know what jiu-jitsu was. But nowadays I always tell my younger athletes, like, man, like you're not going to be this young forever. Your body's not always going to feel this good and your joints aren't always going to be this malleable. You're going to get brittle. You're going to have to adjust how you do things. You're going to have to slow things down and really focus on like tactics and mechanics and strategy and things like that as you get older, and energy conservation. And, if you just don't train intelligently over the years, you're going to get injuries and issues with your body that last decades, last forever. One of my old coaches has such a bad neck because he got stacked in a triangle once and he refused to let the triangle go, and his neck just started popping. He refused to let the triangle go. And it's like, now he's fucked. It's such a dumb thing to do for ego purposes, because you don't want to lose or whatever reason it is. And so I think, it's important to have like a senior student tell the young athletes like, hey, like let's think long-term too. Let's not just try and win the round today, but let's think long-term. Let's think 20 years from now, you still want to do jiu-jitsu, right? Like you still want to be able to roll, protect your neck, protect your back, your hips, your shoulders, your knees, all that shit. Like prioritize longevity, because not training intelligently is not good. Trying to win every round and, putting the victories against your training partners in the training room ahead of like skill development is not really, it feeds your ego in the meantime, because it's great to win rounds and whatever, and to have that competitive edge in the room. But, like when you go to training, you should be trying to develop skills primarily, I would say. And development of skills does not always mean winning all of your rounds in the training room. It just doesn't. More on that in a second. When you're going to the training room, like skill development and winning are two different things. If I'm going to be in a competition, getting ready for a competition, I want to be winning my rounds most likely. But if I'm learning octopus guard, if I'm learning, a new type of leg lock or something, I got to put myself in those positions under stress and try and make it work. And a lot of the time you're going to get fucked up because those are not new, or those are new things for you. So, always playing that dichotomy between winning in training and skill development. There's always got to be a balance between the two, and you got to know when you're going into training that you're training with a purpose, and that you have a goal in training, whether it's to win or whether it's to learn. You always have that training with a purpose, and you're not just going in trying to smash every time and go as hard as you can. Even the best teams like at New Wave, Danaher's like, I expect my athletes to train every day. I don't expect them to train hard every day. Some days can be recovery based days or drilling or, lifting, whatever it is. That you can train every day for sure, but you cannot train 100% every day, and you shouldn't. You'll just start to see negative returns. Developing new skills in jiu-jitsu often means less success short term, and that's completely normal, and that's completely okay and to be expected. All right, this is an interesting one. Not giving back to others and to your teammates. So a lot of people go into, there's a cliche, and it's true. If you're a high level competitor, you should go in and you should be selfish, and that is true. Competitors do have to be selfish because, when you shake hands with your opponent at the tournament, it's just you in there versus them. But like that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have that abundance mindset. What is an abundance mindset? Is the belief that like there's enough wealth, there's enough happiness, and there's enough success in the world or in the training room for everyone. And other people not having success does not equate to you having success. When all the, what's the saying? When the tide rises, all the boats float, right? So if everybody in the training room gets good, and if you take it upon yourself to make everyone get better a little bit each day, by osmosis, you will get better. Because when your training partners get better and they learn what you're doing and they see your tricks, now they will adjust their games and adapt to try and defeat you. And you're forced to now evolve to stay ahead of them. And so everyone else gets better, the lower ranks and the higher ranks at your gym. That means you get better. And that's very, very important. That's why I train with people in the city as often as I can. Not often enough, but as often as I can. I might potentially fight these people one day. And some people look at that and they're like, that's fucking crazy. Like, why would you want to train with somebody that you're going to compete with and show them your game when you might potentially face them? And now they've seen like what you like to do, and they felt your pressure, and they know how to shut you down. It's like, yeah, but if they get better, I get better. And if they beat me in competition, if I approach it in a mature, and productive way, then I also get better. So it makes sense in the long run. I don't give a shit if I lose to somebody in the city. Like, I'd way rather win a bigger tournament internationally, and I'd way rather see that person succeed internationally as well, because they're my peer from Vancouver. And when I see somebody from Vancouver do well at ADCC trials or at Jiu Jitsu Con or Masters Worlds, like, that's good for me. And knowing that I trained with that person and seeing them succeed makes me feel good. And that's a really, really important trait for people, I think, to have that abundance mindset. If you see somebody that not do well and you're like, yes, good, that person did do well, it's like, I understand, but it's kind of shitty, because, you should hope for success of others. And I think as a gym owner, I get a lot of joy out of seeing success from other people. I don't care if it's from another gym or my own students. I want to see people in Vancouver succeed because it's my area, it's my community. And so like, what if not giving back to teammates? What if there's a guy who's just like a shitty uke, and you don't give him the feedback like, hey, you're being a shitty uke right now. Like, you're shutting down my moves when I'm trying to perform my part of the move, or you're being too rough, or you're giving me reactions that don't make any sense. Like, some people don't take it upon themselves to give that feedback and to kind of coach that person to be a better training partner, when that's absolutely an opportunity to improve not just that person's game, but your own game. And as a product of that, improve the overall vibe and the level in the training room. So I think that everyone, regardless of being a competitor or recreational or as an instructor, should go into training with the intention of improving the level in the room, not just themselves, right? And in the end, everyone gets better. The room gets better. It's just a higher level training area, and everybody improves. All right, let's talk about mindset. And, again, we're going to use that magic K word, special K, Kaizen mindset, right? And Kaizen mindset is just trying to develop better systems. This is something I always talk about. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Never be satisfied with your current level of knowledge. Never be satisfied with what you know as the end all be all, or think that you've already figured out the problem. If you want to use the scientific method, we always have to satisfy all hypotheses. So if I think that there's a better way to do something, or maybe another way to do something, like there's not always just one way to do something. There's often many ways, and we just need to discover them and put them through the ringer. And through trials, we see, did it work or did it not work under pressure, under live resistance? A lot of people have the mindset where they're afraid to fail. And so they don't want to try new things. They just want to stick to their A game. And that is where you're definitely going to see growth stifle. You definitely shouldn't be afraid to fail. Being afraid to fail is probably one of the biggest things that will kill growth in your life, but also just as a competitor, in the sport. I know people who are terrified to take matches against people they know they might lose that match, right? I know people like this. I've never been like that because I want to get tested. And if I do lose, there's something to be learned for that. Now, that being said, I'm not going to fucking always go in and fight a guy who's like 260. I'm not a fucking idiot. Within reason, right? But being afraid to fail will absolutely stifle your growth. If you're trying to take in new material, maybe you saw the latest Craig Jones DVD and you went to the gym and you tried it once and it didn't feel right. It didn't work. And you're just like, well, this isn't for me. It's like, dude, you just tried it once. Like, you got to give things. Sometimes you should try things for a couple of months and see if you can make things work. Like, a big one for me is octopus. Octopus guard is probably the least natural thing that I can think of when it comes to playing like a half guard. For me, I love coyote style half guard, like old school tight waist wrestle up and roll through half guard dilemma. That's super comfortable for me. Octopus feels completely uncomfortable because you're giving your partner, you're kind of sacrificing your frames to give your partner torso to torso contact. And I do really like the position, but man, I fail with it a lot because I'm playing with it. I'm trying to make it work. And then for every 8 times it works, I get like one piece of success. And it's like, I know those aren't great numbers, but I have faith that through the process and over time and just keep trying it, And if I try it enough times, I'll start to become really, really comfortable with it and be able to make it hopefully a part of my game. Another thing is buggy chokes. I feel very uncomfortable doing buggy chokes because buggy choke requires you to give up all frames. And instead of recovering your guard, you're trying to submit someone from like an inferior position. But yet you see guys buggy choke at the higher levels like Jay Rodriguez and a bunch of other people. I've been buggy choked in competition. I've been buggy choked in the training room. And I started playing with it, and yeah, I would get my guard passed quite a bit, and I'd have to dig myself out of a deep hole. And then other times I would try it, and I'd be like, man, I got a buggy choke. Like, that's super cool. Okay, so there's something here. I should follow it. So we call this investing in loss, right? Not investing in loss will absolutely stifle your growth in BJJ. Got to be able to, don't avoid struggle and don't avoid discomfort and don't avoid failure. If there's a great proverb, failure. If I failed, it doesn't mean that I failed. It just means that I figured out what doesn't work, right? And then you can kind of narrow down through trial and error what doesn't work and start to see what really does work. And then that will give you a new level of learning. So don't abandon the octopus guard or the buggy chokes. Maybe you don't want to use them in competition because in competition you want to play your A game. That's fine. But that doesn't mean that, you shouldn't tinker with it in the training room, give your partner some different looks. And a lot of people also will they'll be worried about what someone else says, or they're trying to impress somebody rather than just learning for themselves, or they'll try to measure themselves against somebody else. They'll have the mindset where I got to beat this certain training partner, or I'm not good enough, or, I don't want my training partners to be better than me because I'm comparing myself to my training partners. It's what you should do is just keep your head down and just focus on your own learning, right? Everyone learns at a different pace. Everybody's journey progresses in a different, at a different rate. And that's totally healthy. And that's how it should be. So stop comparing yourself with others. Look to others for inspiration. When I see somebody who's better than me, I don't look at that person. I'm like, fuck, I need to beat that guy or else, I'm less than. It's no, that inspires me to train harder. It inspires me to see what I could do better. Look at that person. Maybe it's somebody who beat you in a competition. You might have feelings of fuck, I hate that guy. He beat me, which is fair. But you should also look at that person and be like, why did he beat me? What is he doing that I'm not doing? That inspires me to be a better athlete. At the end of the day, you push each other. And we've seen this through MMA, through Jiu Jitsu, constantly through different grudges and different rivals, seeing people be inspired by the other athlete, and then they're pushed to be even better. So, I think not everyone I think goes into jiu-jitsu with the mindset of, I want to reach my maximum potential, or I want to be exceptional. Being exceptional at jiu-jitsu is not for everyone. But I think if you're going to invest the time and money in jiu-jitsu, and let's say a goal for you is to get a black belt one day, you should aim to reach, a high level of potential, at least your own personal maximum potential. That's not going to mean that that's going to be the same potential as a Gordon Ryan necessarily, but just the maximum potential for you. If you're really involved in jiu-jitsu and you're hey, I'm going to come to the gym 4 times a week. It's man, why not come to the gym 4 times a week and have some pretty high standards for yourself? And aim to reach the highest potential you possibly can. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is shit talking about people. And I've done this myself, you guys. I mean, I've talked a lot of shit. I've been caught talking shit about people. I'm not going to lie. I can remember in one tournament, there's a guy from another gym, and I asked him, I said, hey, so-and-so, can you film my match? And he's like, yeah, sure, no problem. And so he took the camera, filmed the match. I submitted the guy. Came back and I was like, oh, thank you, man. I took my phone back and then I looked at it and I didn't know he was around me still. This was a couple minutes later. I'm watching. I'm like, oh, the fucking guy didn't film this part. And then I turn around and he's right there. And he heard me say that. I just got caught with my foot in my mouth, being ungrateful that this guy didn't catch a part of the match that I wanted it to have. And I said, that fucking guy. And he's just right there. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm a fucking asshole. I'm just totally ungrateful in that moment, and you never know who's listening to you. And so that was kind of a moment where I was like, I'm not going to forget this. That was a learning lesson for me. This guy went out of his way to do something for me. And the next second I'm kind of running my mouth because he didn't do something the way I wanted. And so, yeah. And other people heard me and I was like, fuck, I feel super embarrassed right now. This is not good. I never want to do this again. Definitely a learning lesson. Talking shit about people, gossiping, slandering people, especially when they're not around to defend themselves. Like these are all negative habits. And again, I think we've all done that. We've all had that coworker that we don't like, that we've, talked to our significant other or our family or our coworkers about. This is just what we do as humans, honestly. But like I try to not do that. And when I do, I try not to slander them. I try to be fair when I talk about people, or if I need to vent about somebody that's giving me problems. We all have those people in our life and we all need to vent. Like it is what it is. As a human being, we do need that, but it's like we can do it in a way where we're just shitting on that person and putting them down. And we can do it in a way where we can be fair and we can just objectively call it how we see it and still not hate that person and, give that person some grace as well while we're assessing the situation. So just like that can definitely stifle your growth, is just getting into a habit of talking shit about other people, putting the blame of other people, your shortcomings on other people. I would see that constantly working in hotels where, oh, somebody's blaming someone for leaving them in the shit the next day in the kitchen. It's like, yeah, but you also have to take ownership for your own, for yourself. And if you need help, you got to ask for help. You can't just fucking slander the person who worked your station before you. And it's not going to get you anywhere. If anything, it's just going to make you more upset. And that gets to our last topic, which is a similar thing. And that's the idea of holding grudges against people. Grudges against people. Guys, I'm a pretty stubborn person, honestly. And I think I was previously more stubborn. Age tends to sweeten a lot of people. Like my dad is a pretty hard ass guy as well. And I think age has somewhat sweetened him. And I feel like the same has happened for me. In my 20s, when I was working at Kitch's, man, like I was aggressive. I was, I can imagine at times not very fun to work with. And I remember multiple people that I had grudges with. And when I say grudges, I mean like a seething hatred for that person that I would have to see a lot. I would see these people more than I would see my family. And the truth is that it takes less energy to be positive towards people than it does to be negative. It takes a lot of energy and effort to be negative and to hold grudges and to hate people. And I remember there was one person in particular that I used to work with at the hotel, and I would see this person almost daily. And every time I saw them, I would be filled with anger and frustration because they sucked at what they did. And oh, she was a fucking bitch and all this stuff. just a garbage cook and like just a greasy. I could use a lot of pejoratives to describe this person, and she could do the same for me. But at the end, it didn't get me anywhere. It didn't make my life better to hold that grudge, to not talk to this person intentionally, to have this energy constantly in my workplace where like, it's like, I fucking hate you. And it was mutual. Instead, I should have gone to that person and be like, listen, we don't have to be friends, but we do have to coexist. And we have a mission, we have a job. And we have to make that a mutual goal. And whether we don't have any other mutual goals or we never want to see each other outside of work is one thing. But like while we're here, we do need to coexist. And it would be best if we could respect each other. Even if we don't want to respect each other as a friend, like as a coworker, we should. And I never said that to that person, and I should have. And I'd like to think that if I was in that situation now, knowing what I know, that I would have done that. And I regret not doing that. And a lot of energy of mine and a lot of what's the stress hormone, cortisol, was I felt a lot of that because of how I chose to treat that person and because they were treating me like that. But I could have been the bigger person. I could have said, let's squash this because we're going to work so much better, and we don't have to be friends, but we should like not hate each other because at the very least, it'll make work more enjoyable to not see this person and be like, you fucking cunt, you burnt the chowder or whatever the fuck it is. In the end, grudges really do nothing positive for you. It just serves your ego, your bad ego, and your pride, right? You too much pride to break the grudge, too much pride to admit, hey, maybe I did something wrong or I was a dick and like, maybe we should like squash this. What do you think? And then let go of those grudges. And I think that that's a great I think in life it's very, very important to just let go of grudges that you have. And I think we all have grudges. We all have people in our life that we don't like. And like I said, it takes more energy to hold a grudge than it is to be friendly to someone. And that's it. Those are the biggest things that can stifle your growth in BJJ. A couple more things I want to talk about before we get out of here. One of them, I'm signing up for a couple of competitions coming up. There's the Revolution, which is probably the biggest competition in the Pacific Northwest here in the Vancouver, Washington, Oregon area. It's in Puyallup, Washington. It's a great tournament. I think last time I saw it, I just registered for it. There's like 1,500 competitors. Like, that's a big tournament, right? Excuse me. And man, they basically follow like the IBJJF system. So for weight classes and rule sets, the only thing is for some reason they don't allow heel hooks in the adult black belt no-gi divisions, which I think they absolutely should. I'm working on them to do that, but whatever. It's a fun challenge to go into a tournament and not be able to use my heel hooks. But one thing I noticed when I was signing up, because I haven't signed up for competition in a while, especially with the IBJJF rule sets, and that's the idea that why the fuck do they have two weight classes, gi and no gi? Like, it's to me, it doesn't make any sense why middleweight, you're doing these two divisions in the same day. If you're doing gi and no gi, right? You got to weigh in twice. Usually the way they do it is gi is first, no gi is second. That's how I've seen this tournament run. And a lot of tournaments are like that. And so middleweight in the gi is 181.5, I think, in IBJJF. And then no gi weigh-in is 175. So they're assuming that your gi is going to be like 6 or 7 pounds. Like, okay, first of all, if I want to be like at my full hydrated capacity for 181 in the gi, I could, why am I making sure that I'm coming in later in the day weighing 175? Like, I could easily weigh in at 178 and my gi would weigh like 2 or 3 pounds. My gi doesn't need to weigh 6 pounds, And like, why are we weighing in twice? Why are we weighing in the gi? Honestly, I think that's the stupidest thing. Like, it's bad enough you got to weigh in right before you compete. I know a lot of people actually do like that. I've always hated it. I think weighing in the day before, getting it out of the way, and then you show up on fight day and all you have to worry about is performing. You don't need the stress of like making weight that morning or whatever. Like, I think that's just way better. And I think the tournaments run way more organized as well. But it's stupid that middleweight on one hand in no gi is 175. And on the other hand, in the gi is 181. So now I got to make sure that I can make no gi weight as well later on in the day. So I'm probably going to weigh in the gi at like 178, 179 when I could weigh in a couple more pounds, and some people do one division or the other. Like, why not just weigh in once and say, okay, you're good. You've made weight for today. You can compete in both. And why do you have to wear a gi? I know in like judo and I think in Naga, you don't weigh in the gi. And it really, if you think about it, why does it matter if you weigh in the gi? Like, everyone's gi weighs a different weight, but that doesn't really have anything to do with like somebody's size. You know what I mean? Like the thickness of my gi or the thickness of my belt has nothing to do with like how heavy I am, really, if you think about it. So it's such a dumb system. And I really, if you want to keep same day weigh-ins, fine. I get it. We've been doing it that way forever. Let's keep doing that way, I guess. But like, why two different weights? Why not make middleweight no gi like 178? The gi shouldn't be 7 pounds. Like, what am I, a fucking giant or something? What is my gi, like an A10 or something? Like, I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me. I think weigh-ins should be done without the gi across the board. I think it's just better that way. And you weigh in once and you're good to compete middleweight, both gi and no gi, and fucking call it a day and start hydrating because you're going to be there for hours competing later. I don't know. Guys, chime in the comments and tell me if I'm absolutely stupid for thinking that, because I think it's crazy. Then I got ADCC 2 weeks after the Revolution. So this would be in October. This is coming up in a couple of weeks here. And so I've been training a lot on my wrestling and trying to make my stand up as good as I can, because I believe that that's the biggest part that I need to work on to win that tournament ADCC Vancouver. It's going to be a lot of fun. Final question, and this will definitely go with a lot of the things that I suggested earlier in the show. This was a question from one of the listeners. What would you do differently with your jiu-jitsu career if you could go back and guide yourself? Well, hindsight is 2020. I'm gonna echo a lot of things that I did earlier in the show. I have no real regrets, if I'm being totally honest. Like, I live a beautiful life. I get to teach jiu-jitsu. I get to work with children and empower them and share jiu-jitsu, what I believe is good jiu-jitsu, to my community. And I get to get paid for it. There was a time when all I really wanted was just to get paid and make a living doing jiu-jitsu. And I have that now. So this is like all gravy for me. So I don't regret anything. I wouldn't really change too much. Every night that I go to bed, I generally, like, genuinely feel that I did everything I could. And I really recommend to everybody that when you go to bed, you should feel exhausted. You should feel like you emptied the tank that day, that you really did everything you could. And only occasionally should you have like a lazy ass day where it's like, I fucked the dog today because I really, I needed some rest, because I've been crushing it so much lately that, like, I owe it to myself to have that rest. And I think that that's warranted. But generally, when we're trying to crush and accomplish things, like, you should go to bed every night knowing that you did everything you possibly could. And I think that that's a really, really important thing to go through life with. That's what I always think of. I wish I started earlier. If I could change my jiu-jitsu journey, I would have started earlier for sure. But again, can't control that. Injuries, unfortunately, I have a thing where I only realize and recognize how mortal I am once I get an injury. And it's kind of a catch-22, because there is a benefit to that. After you get injured, you realize, like, oh, I got to be careful in this transition. I got to be careful here. I got to be more aware. I got to be more in tune with my body. And I think that that's actually a good thing, but it's just sucks that sometimes it's an injury that takes you to recognize that. So as I was talking about earlier in the show, when you're in your 20s and you're just like, everything is a spaz roll, it's ADCC worlds every round. It's like, that's not, like I said, that's not really the most intelligent way to train. And I wish that I'd maybe toned things down a little bit and gotten a little bit more in tune with my body and trained a little bit safely. I believe that the technical ability and availability of knowledge is very different now than from when I started, which was like a short 16 years ago. It's crazy how the level of jiu-jitsu, how it's changed from then to now. And so I think that that's like, honestly, I think that's a huge accomplishment for my generation of jiu-jitsu fighters in itself. And I feel like I'm trying to push that in my area, and I take pride in that, because, when I started, there was like no black belts around in Vancouver. There was a couple, and nowadays there's tons of black belts, and a lot of these up and coming kids are unbelievably skilled. And so I just feel very, very fortunate and very lucky to be a part of that. I wish definitely wish that I quit my culinary career earlier. That would have been awesome, but certain things had to fall into place for me to do that. So I couldn't really do that. Very different. Everyone's got bills, very, very expensive in Vancouver. So it wasn't really on the, something that was possible for me to do. But if I could have, I would have tried to have leveraged my life and my career towards jiu-jitsu earlier. Hindsight's 2020. A big one that I should have done, that I do now, that everyone can do, you can do it today, is prioritize sleep. I've always prioritized diet, before I cured my autoimmune. I don't want to say cured. Before I put my autoimmune in remission by troubleshooting my diet and doing an elimination diet, I was eating pretty much everything, but I was still eating what I thought to be healthy food. And then I found out that that food that I was eating wasn't really healthy for me at all. So I can't say that I wasn't prioritizing diet, because I was just ignorant as to what would cause my body issues. Now I know. But the one thing that I always neglected was my sleep. I didn't ever neglect exercise. I always loved training. I always loved playing hockey, lifting weights. I always got tons of exercise, probably more than I needed, more than I should have had. But the sleep was something that I couldn't get because of my other job. And I definitely, that's my one of my main regrets. Something I should have prioritized more was getting more sleep, and you should too. Everyone should prioritize sleep. Now I do. And now when I can sleep in, the whole Jocko thing where he's like, your alarm clock goes off at 4 a.m. and are you going to answer the call, good or whatever? Like it's 3 a.m. and you got to get a workout in. Good. It's when it's weak to sleep in. It's like, dude, I fucking woke up at like 4 or 3:30 to go do the breakfast shift for years. Like, and now I've earned the right to sleep in. Motherfucker, I'm sleeping in because my body needs it and I function better with it and I fucking deserve it. So if I can, I'll take those days where I can sleep in, honestly. Guys, prioritize your sleep. Go check the science on that and see how beneficial it is for your health. And the last thing that I don't regret it, or I wouldn't do something differently, but I would just understand that in life and in jiu-jitsu, especially as a gym owner, you can't make everyone happy. It's not possible to make everyone happy. Especially with customers, certain customers. I've discussed on the show some issues that I've had with people, and you try to make people happy all the time. Some people just can't be happy, and that's something that we need to come to terms with. We can do our best. We can try to be as fair as possible. We can try and help people as much as we can, and sometimes it totally goes underappreciated and unnoticed. So to some degree, yes, got to keep customers happy. Got to keep people in your circle happy and try to retain them as customers. But at the end of the day, you cannot make everyone happy. That is just unreasonable. And at the same time, you also have to be happy. So keep yourself happy as well. Guys, that's the show. The fastest ways to stifle your growth in BJJ. I hope it was helpful for you. You guys can always reach me with the links below, or just send me a text on Instagram, shoot me an email. Again, that is in the bottom. If you guys want to support the show, check out the links in the bottom. Like, share, subscribe, leave a review, leave a comment, especially if you can think of other ways that you think people can stifle their growth in BJJ, and how you can get out of plateaus and things like that. But I really, really appreciate you guys listening, and I hope that it was fun for you, because it was very fun for me. And I will see you next time on the Everyday Jiu-Jitsu Podcast, because the Everyday Jiu-Jitsu Podcast is everything you need to know about Jiu-Jitsu. So we're going to see you later. Bye, guys. Bye.